Hello and welcome to today's event. I'm Laura Dillon from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here today for a session on automating exemption certificate rules. I'm joined by Matt Patrick and Kiel Kopenski. They're regional sales managers at Avalara, and it's great to have them back for part 3 of this 3-part series on sales tax rules that can hurt your business and how automation can help. So as we get started, please know that Kiel and Matt would welcome your feedback and questions during today's event. You can use the Q&A block or the chat that you'll see on the right side of the webcast session. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Kiel to start things off. Kiel?
Hey, thanks, Laura, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming back and attending our third and final segment for the webinar series we've been going through this week. So today what I want to focus on is we're going to review the laws on how and when to exempt sales and how to manage the documentation that proves exempt status. Okay, so what I want to review today, let's do an overview of the exemption certificate process. So let's get an understanding of the rules behind these certificates, why they're in place, and the best practices to manage them. Next, I want to go through the top 5 activities that we recommend you do if you want to survive an audit. Third, let's discuss how Avalara can bridge the gap with our automated solution. I'll do a demo of our cert capture offering and just do a slight review on what automation looks like. And then we can answer any questions and finish up with our series for the day. So exemption certificates. So whenever a customer claims that they do not have to pay sales tax, they must have the documentation to prove it. And I always like to refer to exemption certificates as a hall pass to sales tax, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But both manufacturers and distributors, they make direct sales to retailers and other distributors. So the sales that are made that are intended to be resold to consumers, those can be exempted from sales tax collection under a resale exemption. So since sales tax is something that's only required to be paid once in the process, so the theory behind a resale exemption, it's pretty simple. The customer or the consumer or the end user, since they're going to pay the sales tax on the full retail price, so that when the reseller purchases from a manufacturer or distributor, they can be exempted from paying that sales tax in the transaction because it's assumed it's going to be paid somewhere across the line. So resellers who want the benefit of an exemption, they must present the manufacturers or distributors with the current and effective proof of their resale intentions. So a hall pass for sales tax, the reason I call it that is that because everything's fine if you have your certificate and it's present, it's valid, it's retrievable, it's not expired. You know, if everything's the way in order, then you're going to be fine. But as soon as something's missing, you can't find a certificate, it's expired. You know, that tax ID number no longer correlates with the company at hand, or any other reasons for it to be invalid. Suddenly, you're on the hook for the sales tax because it needs to be paid somewhere. If that documentation's not there, not right, that's going to fall on you. So it makes these certificates very important suddenly. So there are 3 primary ways to exempt different types of transactions. Now on Tuesday, we covered rate calculation, understanding how to calculate that right sales tax rate, when different things are taxable or not. Now that's called a product-based exemption. Each state can have different rules on how and when to tax their products and services. You generally don't need an exemption certificate for that. A second example is an entity-based exemption. So this is an exemption based on who is purchasing the product or who is selling the product. You know, a lot of nonprofit organizations, depending on the state, they're often exempt. Different governments can be exempted, things like that, based on their status of who they are. For a use-based exemption, this is an exemption based on the purchaser's use of the product. So if a buyer is purchasing a product to resell, there's no sales tax that's paid there. If they're purchasing it to be used within their business in a specific manner, then sometimes that exemption can be covered, just depending on the state's rules. So the exemption certificate lifecycle, it consists of a few steps, and this begins when a sales order or an invoice is created, and that first initial certificate is requested. However, oftentimes customers don't know what sort of documentation they need to provide, and those who are taking the order don't have the expertise in place to know which sort of documentation they're supposed to be getting in return. So the certificate collection process itself, it can be very time consuming, and it's very easy for things to go wrong just from misunderstanding the process. So when there's a lack of process on the seller side especially, it can create a lot of issues. But once that certificate is collected, the next step is it needs to be validated. You need to make sure that everything's filled in correctly, you have all that pertinent information that makes this a valid certificate, and more importantly, that it's the right certificate. So once it is validated, then it's stored. It's supposed to be stored in a place that's safe, easily retrieved. But after that, the cycle really it's never going to stop. There's continuing maintenance that's required to ensure that these stay valid, that they're up to date, because they do expire. Some states expire every year, some states never expire, but each state has different rules behind it. So there is constant maintenance that needs to go in place with this, and we'll go into more depth in that shortly. I'm pausing to see if there's any questions. Good to go. So there are no universal rules for taxability or exemptions. Like we've talked about in the past couple of days, every state is independent of each other. They can make their own rules. They can adjust them. It doesn't matter. So what that means is that you need to have the knowledge base in place to know when these things are going to change. So things like, is this product taxable? Depends on the state. This is just a list of examples of that. So, for instance, we were talking about these nonprofits and how sometimes they're classified as exempt and sometimes they're not, and that's all decided by the state. And there are also, there's a few states, a handful of states you can see right here: California, Washington, Arizona, as an example. These states actually require their state and local governments to pay the sales tax as well. So there are no consistent rules from state to state. That's the takeaway from that. Okay, so now I want to go through some of these top survival tactics that we recommend you do if you want everything to go smoothly in the way that you're managing your certificates. So number one, survival tactic number one, I would say, you need to understand the nature of your exemption certificate. So sales can be exempted for many different reasons. And these include the nature of the use. How or where will the goods be used by the buyer? For example, if it's for resale, it can be exempted. If it's going to be consumed, in some cases it can be exempted, but then you need to self-assess your tax on that. How's it going to be used? Secondly, what's the nature of the goods or services being sold? This goes into taxability like we talked about. So some states do not tax services and labor, others do. Another example is the nature of the buyer. Some states are going to exempt different agencies based on their status. So as the number of products are sold, the likelihood of sales, tax-exempt sales, that's going to increase. And with that, it's going to become increasingly more difficult to manage these exemptions correctly. So what we recommend you do to survive and really understand the nature of this is create systems that are going to track the changing rules regarding the nature of each tax-exempt transaction. Do your research. Track different tax holidays, track the product and service related to exemptions, and just understand your exemptions based on the use and based on where the sale is taking place. So survival tactic number 2, understand what makes a certificate valid and what doesn't. So you need to be able to determine this valid this exemption certificate is valid. So there are a few types of exemption certificates that are offered depending on the state. So states that are participating in the Streamlined Sales Tax Initiative, if you're familiar, that's just a grouping of states that have a unified exemption certificate and a unified approach to managing sales tax compliance. In some cases, a company does not have to be registered to use an exempt form, but it really just depends on the jurisdiction. So complications arise for businesses that are selling in those 23 non-member states. So some non-member SST states, they accept out-of-state exemption forms, but some do not. Tracking individual form requirements in each jurisdiction into which you sell, that's crucial to the exemption certificate process. So the things that need to be on the form that are going to make it valid is the type of exemption or the nature of the use of the good sold. That needs to be present. The names and addresses of the buyer and seller, those need to be on there. We need a description of the goods purchased. Of course, you need the tax registration number and the signature of the purchaser. If any of those pieces of information are missing or incorrect or invalid, then your certificate's no good. So what you can do to survive, this example is make sure that you're reviewing these exemption certificates that are submitted and, make sure that they're containing the key elements that I've just listed. If the state you're dealing with is an SST state, make sure you're using the right forms there. All right, number 3, know the rules. So knowing which form to use, that's only part of the puzzle. For each state that your company has nexus, you need to be able to track the tax-exempt transactions based on use. You need to account for any of the tax holidays, and you need to understand the source of the transaction. So based on the nature of the product or service purchased, a transaction may or may not be exempt. A manufacturer that's purchasing a durable good for use, used in the production of process of whatever they're making, that might not be required to pay sales tax in some states. And in most cases, those items that are purchased for resale, those are not going to be subject to the sales tax requirements on that first transaction. For tax holidays, every year, this might sound familiar to some of you, every year a number of states are setting different sales tax holidays, like a back-to-school type holiday weekend, or if there's a summer sales tax-free day or weekend, things like that. So you want to know those holidays as they happen so you'll avoid either under or over collecting the sales tax. So what you can do to survive that, as for the tax holidays, you're able to go on the Sales Tax Institute website, and it publishes a list of all the sales tax holidays by state. But knowing whether to collect a resale or an exemption certificate and whether one form can be used or both can be used, or some states have a whole slew of different forms, just know which one is correct for your specific scenario. Okay. Number 4, you need to be able to determine product and service related exemptions. So many states are addressing their budget gaps by increasing product and service taxability. What that means is that what used to be tax exempt, that might be taxable now. The stuff's always changing. So many companies are underestimating what's taxable in their warehouses and offices. An example of that is if you have a warehouse, I'm sure you have pallets that your products are sitting on. And whereas the products might be tax exempt, you most likely owe tax on the pallets. And in the break room of your office, as an example there, those disposable coffee cups, those might be taxable in some manner too. So as taxing jurisdictions are changing, the rules about taxability of goods and services, your business needs to be aware of these changes and adjust its accounting systems accordingly. If you don't understand your tax burden, it can result in a higher risk of an audit. So what you can do there to survive that is review the taxability matrices that you have, review those to your department websites and different revenue websites. That way you can update them and your resources are done correctly. And number 5, of course, automate. From a sales tax compliance perspective, if you're manually managing tax-exempt sales and the paperwork that comes with it, you're only increasing your risk of an audit. It's going to cost a lot more in manpower and other resources than outsourcing is going to cost you. Most companies are turning to the automation of exemption certificate management, and the integration of an exemption certificate solution into their current system to make managing all these exempt sales so much easier. Something as simple as just automatically tying each exemption certificate to each transaction can save hours of time and reduce risk that can lead to the fines and penalties. There's a lot of different advantages for automation, but these include automate the collection of exemptions, track the progress of collecting these certificates so you can know which ones have been received and which ones have not been received. If you automate, it's going to help ensure that these certificates are complete, and it's going to eliminate lost certificates. Just track the expiration dates of these certificates. Like I said, some states have different varying expirations. Like an example for Florida, every year you have to renew your exemption certificate in Florida. In Ohio, you never have to renew it, and there's a whole slew in between. If you can automate this whole process, it's going to really improve your customer experience for your customers. So automating with AvaTax, like I referred to this report in the past 2 days, but the Wakefield research group, they did a study, and what they found is that 1 in 4 companies aren't even tracking their exemption certificates at all. They're doing nothing with it. So what we have found is that if you're growing quickly or you're hoping to grow quickly and the finance team, they really haven't had time to adapt to the complexity that comes with a growing company, then in the early stages, companies are often outsourcing their bookkeeping. It's not until later that they're able to get an internal finance department, let alone a full-time CFO. So taxes tends to be an afterthought in that sense. Since the tax compliance has become a target for state revenue departments, it's making an audit almost inevitable. So what we see here is that 44% of customers can't even remember the last time they gave attention to their sales tax process. Most companies believe that in a case where an audit does happen, an auditor is going to find a mistake. And like we said in the past couple of days, the average total cost for an audit, it can be pretty substantial when you're taking into account direct and indirect costs. So we covered the past couple of days what our AvaTax solution does. This is where we're able to calculate the tax. We have all the sourcing rules in place, all the taxability is all in the cloud, zero maintenance for you moving forward, but we're also able to recognize when a customer is exempt or not based on that status in cert capture. So with cert capture, this is what we're offering. So as with other manufacturing processes, having a repeatable, consistent process with the sales and use tax compliance, that means automation. So automating sales and use tax compliance with the solution, that's going to ensure that we have a consistent and accurate process in place that's going to deliver renewal management, collection of certificates, make it so we can store and retrieve these certificates cleanly, and make these requests to receive updated or new certificates, make it really easy and as automatic as we can. So using an automated solution for sales and use tax compliance, it's going to help manufacturers and distributors stay up to date with their latest changes in sales and use tax information. Consistency, repeatability, and accuracy help to reduce audit risk and potential negative assessments that come with it. All right, so Avalara's approach to this is cert capture, and what we're going to do, it's going to provide a seamless integration with your existing ERP system and other financial applications. This is going to enable you to associate exemption certificates with customers and transactions, and it's going to provide ease of processing for your invoicing, including the sales and exempt status. So if you have an exempt or if you have a certificate management system in place that enables you to have renewals tracked automatically, online collection and storage of certificates, and just simplify your workflow with your tax department, it's gonna really be helpful for everybody if you can process that efficiently. So the way this all works, this is a nice image that really shows the workflow of how cert capture communicates with the tax engine in your ERP system. So what I have down here in the bottom right corner, that's going to signify your ERP system. So here you're going to be able to upload all of your customer information into cert capture, and cert capture is going to communicate with your tax exempt customers and send the requests for exemptions, and then your customers can send the certificates back there. Okay, so in cert capture, this is where we have all the logic in place for understanding when they're going to expire, what the different states' rules are based on the exemption that we have in place. It does all of the heavy work for you, and cert capture is communicating with our tax engine, which we reviewed the past couple of days. And so whenever you're doing you're creating an invoice, your system's going to reach out to the tax engine, and it's going to go through a few steps to make a sales tax designation. The ship to and ship from details, the customer number, the different products and services that are on your invoice. But with that, now the tax engine is understanding, based on your customer number and based on your ship to and ship from details, which exemption certificate is going to correlate to that and what the exempt status is of your customer. So if they're exempt, you're going to get a zero sales tax return or a zero sales tax calculation for your system, and it's going to recognize this is an exempt sale. Does that make sense? Are there any questions there? All right. So now let me move into the demo of cert capture. One second. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I will assume yes. Okay, so this is cert capture. Now, like I said, cert capture is that lifecycle management system that is going to enable you to request, validate, store, and manage all of your sales tax exemptions. And we really want to make everything nice and easy for retrieval. The whole point of this is to ensure that what you have on file is filled out properly and it's filled out up to date. So once a customer is onboarded with Avalara, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to get set up by doing a batch import of their customer information from their ERP system. Okay. With that, we need an import of your existing exemption certificates into the system. Now, there's three ways that you can do that. If you have your exemptions saved on a PDF, you can do a bulk upload of all those certificates. If you have, You're also able to do an email blast to where you can just send an email out to all of your customers and say, hey, Mr. Customer, we are having an internal audit. We need you to, send us a new exemption certificate back. You can go that route. Or we've had customers that have tens of thousands of exemption certificates, and they say, hey, we don't want to deal with the data entry. So we have had a team handle the data entry there too. Most of our customers are going to go with the email campaign. So I want to show you what that's going to look like quickly. So what you're able to do is this is an email right here that I've created. So we have many different templates to choose from. You're able to, mine says Avalara, obviously. You can make yours say whatever you want. It can be on your company header. Just saying, hey, Mr. Customer, for this, that, or the other reason, we need a new exemption certificate. The most important part is this link right here. So me being the customer, I can click on this link, and it's going to take me to the Avalara portal. Within the portal, I need to confirm who I am, which company I'm coming from, so it takes me to my correct area. So in this case, I am the owner. So I will confirm that this is me. Let it take me in. All right, so what we see here is all of my exposure zones, or the places that I have been claiming that I have an exemption. So you don't have anything on file for me, so what I would need to do is come into here and fill all of these in, or send you my exemptions. So the way that I would do this, I'd click here, fill in these select exposure areas, and next it's going to say confirm all this information. This is the information that's going to go onto that exemption certificate. That's the purchaser information. Save and continue. Next here, so I have this for my demos. So this has every single tax exempt reason for the state of California. You're going to be able to tailor this to say whatever you want. So if it's someone that you know is for resale, they will only see the resale part. If it's a government entity, they'll only see that. You can add or subtract as many of these exemptions as you want. So let's assume that I'm doing this for resale. So now I come in here, I just put in my state tax ID. I say, what am I selling? Description of what I'm selling, and I save and continue. The last thing it wants me to do is the signature and the date. So Kiel Kopenski, owner. And now what I can do, instead of having to print this out and then get it signed and make sure all the correct information is filled in there, then have it scanned and emailed back, which it sounds like it would be quick and easy, but all of us know if we're working in finance, things are going to come up, places where you can just set it down, and suddenly a week's gone by and you still haven't gotten your exemption certificate. So being able to do all this in the portal, even signing for signature, it lets all those areas of being able to drop it or not get to it go away. The signatures aren't beautiful, but they're not bad. So as soon as I say save and continue, what it's going to ask me is, do you want to submit this? And as soon as I submit this exemption certificate, it's back into cert capture. And the effect that this has on your business is that now instead of telling whoever's on your team to go and renew all these exemption certificates and call all of these people, it's just done automatically and nothing is taken away from their workload. Early in my career, I did a lot of cold calling. And so I understand that if you're trying to call down to hundreds or thousands of companies to request some of their documentation, you're not going to reach them the first time. And, if you have thousands of companies to call, if you're getting 50 calls in a day, you're really doing good. That's a pretty good rate, and people aren't going to answer the first time. So it saves a ton of time on that front, and you can have your resources managing the things that are actually going to make the money. Let's go back into cert capture. So there's a few functions that I want to show you within cert capture, quite a few different ways to search for things. You can search by customer name, by customer number. You can do a search, I want to find this group of customers, or I want to find this group of exemption certificates. So first, let's do a one-off search for one customer. So I'm going to go Mark's Test Company. So like I said, you can go by the name or you can go by the customer number. If you go by the customer number, it's a little bit more accurate, but either way, you're going to get what you're looking for. So this is the one I'm looking for, Mark's Test Company, customer number 27. So when I come in here, I can see the details of the customer. There's a lot of different things to choose from. Let's go into the taxability information. What we're going to see here is all of their exposure zones and the status of the certificates there. So we can see California, that's valid, that's up to date. Connecticut, invalid. Georgia is missing. Illinois is missing. So we can just send out a certificate request on this if we want to do a one-off search like that. Another way that we can do this is we'll do a search here, customer search. So on the customer search, you have a whole lot of different criteria to choose from. You can go by the state. You can go by the customer numbers if you need to copy and paste their customer numbers into that. It'll pull all of those, and I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. You can go, all sorts of different things. In this case, let's just find the certificates that are invalid. So certificate valid, no. So now what we see is we see 243 customers that are showing a certificate that's not valid for one reason or another, whether it be expired or something's missing in it, or it's missing altogether. So what we can do is that email blast that I referred to earlier that I walked you through, you can now send an email campaign to all of these customers and just wait for them to come in, wait for these certificates to start coming in. Now we have an 80%, 80% of them come in from the first request. And so if you need to make a campaign to track which ones are in and which ones are not, you can also do that. Next, I want to show you certificate reports. So within this section, you can filter the reports that you want to see. In this example, I want to create a weekly report that's going to come notify me of what certificates are going to expire in the next 90 days and how to stay on top of things. And really, the whole point of this report piece is that once you have everything into cert capture, once you have everything up to date, you don't want to have to keep coming into cert capture just to do your homework. And once everything is running smoothly, you can set these reports so that cert capture is going to reach out to you. So, I want to see who's expiring in the next 90 days because a gap in a valid exemption certificate creates issues for my company. Let's run this report. We see 7 companies, or certificates, I'm sorry, that come up that will be, expiring in the future. So what I will do is I want to email this to me. Let's say every Monday morning when I come in the office, I get an email from cert capture that says, hey, Kyle, these are the certificates that need attention. Go get them. Now, it's great to have this feature because instead of having to come into cert capture and look for the problem, it's just coming and notifying you weekly so that the problems never exist in the first place. Okay. All right, the last thing I want to show you is let's look at when, a real-life scenario when an auditor comes requesting exemption certificates. I think we can all agree that it would take multiple hours, if not days, to collect certificates, if someone comes requesting hundreds of these certificates to do this. So let's take a look at that. We'll do a certificate search. And now I'm not sure if all of you, if any of you have been in an audit, but the way that it works when they're looking at your exemption certificates is, in their eyes, exemption certificates are low-hanging fruit. It's easy to check on, it's easy to find mistakes. It's easy to, find discrepancies. So what they're going to do is they will come and have a sample of, a bunch of exemption certificates, and then you're expected to go back, retrieve the certificates, and bring them to them so they can check them. Now, anything that is expired or missing or invalid for any reason, they're going to take that sample error and extrapolate it over the period of the audit. So when this does happen to you, what you can do is you can take that sample of certificate IDs and copy and paste into this bay right here. Just to make this a little bit quicker, I'll just say, let's say we're looking for all the ones in California. So get results. Now we've just retrieved all 219 exemption certificates that have been requested. So what you can do is you can export that as a PDF. You can print it out and give it to the auditor. The whole point in this is get them in and out of your office as fast as you can. You don't want that disruption to your business. It'll certainly take this much more time to print out these certificates than it would to find them. So that is a pretty big luxury to have when you have this solution in place. Now, are there any questions about exemptions or how this works or anything like that that I can answer? I kind of want to open it up for questions now.
Hey, Kyle, I see a question coming through. Has to do with audits. They're getting prepared for an audit. Auditor hasn't come in yet, and they were curious to know what our experience is around, if they ask for just specific audits specific certificates, or do they ask for all certificates in a state? I mean, what are you experiencing? I can give feedback on it as well, but that's a question that's out there.
So in a case of an audit, typically they're going to come in and just say, hey, we want a sample of certificates, and you are required to then produce those certificates. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that about right with what you think?
I've seen it both ways. I've seen some states ask for just selective certificates on certain customers, and then I've seen them say, they want to pull all certificates for the state. And the challenge that I've seen for some customers in that is, how documents are stored. And over the years, sometimes you change how things were stored. Sometimes it was previously in a filing cabinet. You got so many years there, and then you got so many years on the network drive, and then how were the file names stored or structured. And, sometimes it can be just kind of a mess pulling all the certificates. I see there's a hand raised from Phyllis. Phyllis, there's a Q&A box in the window. I would type the question in the Q&A box to ask the question. And for anyone else not familiar with WebEx, there's I think it's on the right-hand side, Kyle, there's a little drop-down for Q&A. And when you type it in there, we'll be able to capture it on our end to see what the question might be.
I have a question right here. It says, can you send certs by email? So I think I understand what you're saying there. So yes, you're able to receive exemption certificates a lot of different ways. So what we did with the portal, that was just going into the portal, putting in the information, and automatically sending it back. Now, a lot of our customers not a lot of them, but some of our customers have said that they still have some of their customers who are not really savvy to email yet. So, we're able to send these requests via email, via mail, via fax. And what that means is that if you're getting one via fax or via mail, then yes, you can either send them an email of the exemption certificate that you have, or you can fax one back, or you can mail one back. And then, okay, I have another question. It says, can you send auditors the requested certificates by email? Matt, Can you? I'm not sure I follow it. Can you give them the auditor?
So I think what they're asking is, so when an auditor comes in, what are the options to help support the audit out of cert capture? So what we see is, and what's really nice about the product is you can be selective as to what you need to print. The auditor comes to you and says, give me these 25 customer numbers and their certificates, their related certificates. You can do so. And you can print it all to one large PDF. You can print it all to 25 separate PDFs in like a zip file if you want, and just email it over. And then, for larger engagements, I have a customer right now. They have about 30,000 certificates. So as you can imagine, it's a it's a large project that they need to clean up on their certificate side. But for them, it would have been a lot easier if they did have the documents in cert capture. They would have just been able to give the auditor access rights to a selective portion of the database, and you can kind of carve what section of the database that the auditor needs access to. So there's really a bevy of options to help support you in an audit. It's just a matter of, what makes the most sense, given the context of the request.
Okay. I have another question. So when an exemption certificate expires in your system and the customer does not provide a new certificate, does Avalara automatically inactivate the customer? So I can answer that. So what happens there is that, legally speaking, if you don't have a valid exemption certificate on file, then you are required to collect sales tax from them until you get that exemption certificate back. So what Avalara does is that if we recognize this customer number based on these ship to and ship from details does not have that valid exemption certificate, what Avalara is going to default to when it's making that sales tax designation is to tax the invoice. Now, we understand that can lead to a negative customer experience for your customer, or it can lead to your process where you have to do a credit memo and reissue it when you get the new certificate or whatever. So you have the ability to override that tax calculation and say, no, this is actually sales tax exempt. We just don't have the exemption certificate back. And so you can make that choice if you want to do that, or if you want to go ahead and charge them sales tax. That's a pretty motivating way to get an exemption certificate too. So it's really up to you how you want to approach it, but we're going to default to charging them tax if it's not valid.
We would highly recommend charging them tax. That'll wake them up. And it will reduce your exposure, obviously. Eliminate the exposure. That's the main goal of automation and the compliance piece.
Absolutely. All right. I don't see any other questions for the time being. Matt, is there anything else that you wanted to add while I have this up?
No, I think overall, just to summarize, cert capture or managing exemption certificates, what we often see in the field or just in our day-to-day, the conversations with controllers, AR managers, CFOs, the common thread is normally we're collecting certificates. We feel okay about it. And then when you talk to them a couple of years later, they maybe weren't thinking about all the details related to these certificates. What I mean by that is they're doing the do and collecting them, but they're not managing it and managing the process. And what I mean by managing it is they have a certificate on file, but they don't know where it was placed, or it was improperly named or recorded. It was never reviewed properly, so the certificate was collected, but it wasn't filled out correctly, and the auditor threw out a large portion of certificates they thought were valid certificates. Or they're not managing to those expiration dates, and the auditor's asking them to get those up to date. Maybe it gives them that opportunity to do so, but they're just not able to get everything completed in time, or some company went out of business. And what they're finding is these certificates can cost thousands of dollars. So these pieces of paper can be like a $2,000 bill or a $10,000 bill, depending on the nature of the audit and the number of certificates, and more importantly, the percentage of your business that is non-taxable versus taxable. So we see that a lot too, where customers don't think of automation in terms of its Well, it's value to them because maybe they have 95% of their business is non-taxable, but what they're not thinking about is in an audit, guess what? The auditor is going to care about this area of your business and exemption certificates because they're going to know if they're going to get an audit assessment out of this engagement, it's really going to rely upon looking at how do we find an error rate in your non-taxable transactions, which is the bulk of your invoicing and bulk of your sales, in addition to use tax. So, that's just what we see. CertCapture helps really close the loop and provides tools for customers to really manage exemption certificates instead of just collecting them, because it does provide you both the components of being able to run the right reports, identify the customers that are expired. It provides you tools to help collect new certificates and manage that process. So if you're entering new states, you might send a request out to 200 customers to get a new certificate, but what customers aren't doing is creating an Excel spreadsheet where they're saying these 100 or 200 customers, we requested it, we received these 50, and we still need to track down these additional 50 or 100 or 200. And what happens there is, it's a management thing, and you got to create your own internal processes, whereas in CertCapture, it's basic tools in using the campaigns within our system that can help track that type of activity and really help manage those collection of new certificates.
So what you can do if you want to manage the ones that you've gotten is you can make a report that's going to say, hey, these are these certificates that you have gotten back, which is something that, it's hard to track otherwise.
Actually, go ahead, Kyle, go to request area. I'll kind of show what I was describing. So go to the request tab, go to campaigns.
Yep.
Okay, let's just go to Courtney's test. It's the one down where you see 3 emails sent, round 2, 4 PDFs generated.
Yep.
Go to manage. It's on the right. Okay. So imagine, go to overview. Oh yeah, that's actually that's the letterhead. So we do mail merge, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. So the green would represent those that have responded with valid certificates, and the red is who you're tracking down their customer number. Because I mean, this is the challenge, right? It's one thing just to get the document and store it, but who's managing the Excel spreadsheet for expirations and how they, what state rules, and then when you go to collect or do a large campaign to do a collection of certificates, how do you manage that process? It's just identification, right? The simple things of who's responded and who hasn't. And there's just, obviously tools in the software that do that naturally and make the process much more efficient. And a lot of the times we get involved in, or customers that come to us are coming to us because their CPA firm had used or seen our software and other projects where they're helping customers in an audit. And they knew that, this tool was going to help put in the repeatable processes for them to really help manage it on a go-forward basis or do a large collection campaign where certificates were no longer were collected previously. So, Kyle, yeah, that's all I had. That's my 2 cents.
Kyle,
all right.
Okay, great. That's Kyle, Matt, thanks so much for your time today. That concludes today's session. We did record it, and we'll be sharing that with all of the attendees soon. Please also look out for a brief survey that will pop up after you close out. We'd really appreciate your feedback. So I guess we'll end there. Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thanks, Laura.